Hello and welcome to Spinster's Library. I'm Claudia, and today, and I realise this is quite late for this video, I want to talk about 3 classics to read in the summer. I did a similar video like this one for spring and winter, where I did actually manage to release that video while the season in question was still going on. We are now at the end of August, and I don't know where you live, but here in North Wales it feels more like early November. It's been pretty much non-stop raining. I can't even remember the last ray of sunshine. Anyway, because it is kind of getting towards the end of the summer, I am only going to talk about 3 books, 3 classics specifically, that I like as a summer read. And hopefully, by the time autumn comes around, in 5 minutes or so, I'll have the autumn video out in time. I'll link the spring and winter videos in the description box if you want to see which classics are recommended to read for winter and spring. But let's go straight into the first recommendation, which is a book that, considering how much I enjoyed reading it, I feel like I don't talk about enough, and that is The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. It's commonly described as a psychological thriller published in 1955, and while it isn't summery in outlook, it certainly is summery in setting. This book follows the eponymous character, Tom Ripley, who is a young American, sort of a dodgy character. How dodgy he is exactly we'll get to know throughout the course of the novel. And he kind of worms his way into the extended holiday of another young American man named Dickie. And Dickie is currently on a week-long, possibly forever lasting holiday in Italy, and his father, who is a businessman, wants his son back in the USA. So he sends Tom Ripley, who kind of pretends to be a friend of Dickie, to Italy, gives him all the money to send him to Italy to try and persuade his son to come back to America. So as Tom kind of worms his way into the life of Dickie, he is very drawn to Dickie, both to him as a person, but also to the life of luxury that he's leading. And this obsession with Dickie leads Tom to some rather horrific deeds. I'm not going to spoiler the book for you. I found it such a fascinating read. It really draws you right in. I can see why it is considered a psychological thriller classic, because you are inside of the head of the main character that does some truly horrific things, but because he is the main character, you kind of want him to win. Just like Tom Ripley, as the reader of the novel, you are fascinated by the glamour of this endless holiday of luxury in Italy, and the contrast between the warm summer glow of Italian beaches and yacht parties and walking around Italian villages like the rich American bastard you are. That glamour contrasts the cold-bloodedness and deepest darkness of the main character's mind. Really, really fantastic novel. Now I'm talking about this book like you haven't seen the movie, but a lot of people have seen the movie adaptation. I saw it. I have to say it sticks in my head less than the book. I actually watched the movie first and then read the book, and they did change a few things in the movie. It's still a really good film. Look at me pretending that I know what I'm talking about when it comes to films. I watched the film, I didn't fall asleep. That's as high a praise as any movie can get from me. But the book was amazing, and you should read it, whether you've seen the film or not. The second novel that I want to recommend to you, and I'm smiling because I've just realised something that connects all 3 of my classics recommendations, and that is Italy. So before we get into my second recommendation, let me just talk about Italy for a bit. Maybe I am connecting summer reads with Italy because for the entirety of my childhood and youth, I went to Italy every single summer, not on a nice luxurious yacht holiday, but to visit my family there. Both sets of grandparents are from Italy, and I have about 1 million aunts and uncles there. And I think that's where that connection comes from in my head. Every summer, while I was a child, we would drive down to Italy. Usually what would happen is that we drive from the south of Germany to the very tip of Italy, pretty much in one go, 18-hour drive, with like very short toilet and picnic breaks. Not good memories. I get extremely car sick and I never make it to the end without being sick. Then, after my parents got divorced, we started taking the train down to Italy. And that train journey was almost exactly 24 hours long. And actually, 24 hours on the train is much more pleasant than 18 hours in a car, because you can read on the train. I can read on the train. I don't get travel sick on the train. Me and my brother were allowed to pack 1 book each, because if you're traveling on the train, you have to pack light. And then obviously while in Italy, my time was split pretty evenly between visiting my aunt who lived near a beach, and I mean like pretty much opposite a beach. That was obviously prime reading time. If you've never read on a beach, I don't know what it is about the sound of the sea and the screams of children and the shouts of people trying to sell you ice cream and homemade granita, but there was something about that atmosphere that makes reading just such an experience. And then the other half of the holiday was spent at my grandparents' village in the mountains, which was really quite dull for a child. There's nothing really that goes on in a South Italian village in the mountains. So again, reading became the focus of my life for like 4 weeks in the summer. Maybe that's why I connect Italy to summer reading and to these classics specifically, because all 3 of them, turns out, are at least partly set in Italy. Let's go back to classics. The second classic I want to recommend to you is Where Angels Fear to Tread by Ian Forster, which is set in Italy. Not in the south, this one's set in Tuscany. And our main character is a young widow from England who goes on a holiday to Italy. And she's not a very happy person at the beginning of the novel, because her life is kind of being very heavily controlled by her husband's family. She kind of married up in life. You know, she married into the upper class, and her in-laws' family kind of trample all over her, and she's looking forward to this holiday in Italy for a sense of freedom. She's leaving her child behind in England to be looked after by the in-laws, and when she gets to Italy, she promptly falls in love with a young Italian man. This novel, I find, is Ian Forster's funniest, most satirical, with the most biting sense of humour. And maybe, again, because of my Italian background, I find the book funnier than an English person might, or someone who has no connection at all to England or to Italy. The clash of cultures between the Italian characters and the English characters in the book are what kind of causes the hilarity. But because this is Ian Forster, there is more to the book than English people going, ha, look at those Italians, and Italian people going, ha, look at those English. There is some of that as well, but there is a deeper darkness to the book that only really comes out when some tragedies happen and some really life-changing decisions have to be made. Ian Forster's writing style lends itself to this multi-layered kind of storytelling, where you have, on the one hand, you have the rom-com, then you have the sort of society satire. Ian Forster, he makes fun of the English cultural expectations as much as the Italian cultural expectations. That's the second layer. And then you go deeper and you have the personal drama and the personal tragedy, and the story somehow becomes about human existence and pain and heartbreak and love, and all of these things are bound up in a really quite a short book. Because I'm lazy, I didn't bother getting the book from my bookshelf to show you here, but it is a really quite a short book. I'm pretty sure it's under 200 pages. In my opinion, this is the most underrated of Ian Forster's novels. It isn't as epic as Howard's End. It isn't as heartfelt as Morris, but it is a little masterpiece of holiday classic fiction that I think you need to read if you haven't yet. And my final recommendation for a summer classic read, and I wonder if you're going to agree or disagree with me on that, my final recommendation is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This classic from 1818 is a story that, if you visualize it, you think of dark winter nights in Germany. You think of thunderstorms and cold winds blowing. But listen, Frankenstein is from Italy. I would say probably first third or first half of this novel is set in Naples. And I know Victor Frankenstein doesn't sound like your typical Italian name. I didn't know when I read Frankenstein for the first time that it was set in Italy and in Switzerland. I didn't realise that until I was in the book, and I was like, all right, okay. So my expectations of this have changed. I'm now picturing pizza and warm summer winds and the sound of crickets at night. And that kind of changes the atmosphere of the book for me. I don't know if it does for you as well. Obviously, the entirety of the Book of Frankenstein isn't just set in Italy. There's a lot of different scenes and settings in the book. There's a lot of travelling going on in the book. And that, again, for me, makes it the perfect summer holiday read. Travel is something that we can all just dream about at the moment. I can't say that Frankenstein or his creature go on a nice summer holiday chilling on the beach. But the movement from one place to another within this background of Italy and Switzerland, for me, is very evocative of the summer. And again, what I enjoy about this book, similar to The Talented Mr. Ripley, is this contrast between the warmth of the setting and the coldness of the subject matter. There is a contrast there between the cold, calculating mind of Frankenstein and then the quite hot-blooded, impulsive, emotional qualities of his creation. Yeah, Frankenstein is a novel that I really need to reread quite soon. I was absolutely blown away when I first read it. I didn't expect it to sound so modern. Obviously, I wasn't a stranger to early 19th century fiction when I did pick up Frankenstein, and yet it read like it was a book out of time, and I really loved it. So if you haven't read Frankenstein and you fancy a nice, cheery, summery Italian beachy read, then maybe read about the man who created life that then turned against him. Anyway, those were my 3 classic book recommendations for what's left of the summer. Turns out, instead of being classics you should read in summer, it's more like classics you should read in Italy. But that's a realization that I only came to about halfway through this video, so... I also just want to point out that all of the books will be linked in the description box, and I've also got my Spinster's Library webshop linked in the description box. It's shop.spinsterslibrary.com, where you can look at t-shirts and mugs and stuff like that with Frankenstein, but with cats. Because if there's one thing that makes classic literature better than it already is, it is cats. Let me know what you think of the novels, and let me know your summer classic recommendations for the 5 minutes that we have left of this season before it turns to autumn. Thank you for watching. Bye!